All right, welcome back. Special edition of Looking for Work. I'm going to bring on my co-host for today, special guest. There he is, Chef Winkler. What's going on, man?
What's
We're live.
happening?
Don't say anything crazy. We're live.
Noted.
So Jeff jumped on. He sent me a text message like minutes before, and we're coordinating this. So excited to have you on today, and yeah, we're gonna do it. So for those of you that you're catching this for the first time, let me take this little snack balls thing down because that's not really what we're doing today. We're doing something different. I don't know about leaves either. How about we just go no background? So, how about we do that? How about no background at all? There we go. So we do this every week, or at least I do this every week, and I'm super excited to have Jeff Winkler with us today. If you've got questions, if you're exploring a career in tech, if you're thinking about becoming a software engineer or data engineer or QA apprentice or something that's in tech, between the two of us, we have so much combined knowledge of like what it takes to be successful in an entry level career. I think we can answer just about any question you throw our way. So if you put a comment in the either the chat box or the comment box on whatever you're on, because we're going out live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube's, there's even a Periscope if that's still a thing, and on Twitch, throw a comment in there. It'll come to us and we'll see it and then we'll try and answer it. That's kind of how it works. It's pretty straightforward. Jeff, what is up, man?
What's happening?
I'm just excited. I saw your message earlier today that you're gonna do a little session today. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so there's a few people that took the App Academy online course, which I always advocate for people that want to be taking the time to do stuff for free online while they're working and can't take the time to do an in-person boot camp. And we got a couple of computer science grads that people have referred me, and so I've been a little short on time, so we're just grouping them all together. And today at 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern, I'm just going to go through the process that you and I have gone through hundreds of times to ensure that everybody gets a job, all junior engineers specifically.
Yeah, and you've got some success stories to tout too from the App Academy flow, right? From like,
oh yeah, I have several success stories. So if you, again, my personal opinion is in order to learn how to code when you're going through it, you kind of want a senior engineer close by. And so I kind of always advocate making sure if you can be on site and you have somebody, it helps to be able to get unstuck super quick. But for a lot of people, that's not necessarily the case. And so I found App Academy Open is a free course that you can essentially take for free online. And it's similar to the course they offer in person. So you're going to go a little bit slower, but it'll take like 4 to 6 months if you're pretty diligent about it. Diligent meaning you're working on it most of the day. So if you're working full time, it'll probably take closer to 6 to 9 months. But again, it's free, and we have a couple people taking it in a Slack channel. So I personally went through it to refresh before I got my coding job about 2 years ago. My wife has gone through it and got her first coding job. Before that, she previously ran a home daycare. So then she went through the course, got her first dev job, and now she is on her second dev job, making a lot more than she made at her first dev job.
I love that because
I don't have permission for numbers, but it's a lot more than she made before.
It's a
as
lot.
a daycare person.
We've had this.
Yeah. So hopefully she can't hear me right now. And so my brother has a friend going through it. There's actually, so he'll be in the course tonight, and then I have like 2 or 3 other friends that are going through it right now. So if you do take it, just hit me up on LinkedIn and I can throw you in our Slack channel, because you'll have 5 or 6 other people who have gone through it. And nobody's had previous coding experience, and nobody really had the resources, mainly the resources time-wise, to be able to spend full time on going in person to a boot camp.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm a huge, everybody that knows me knows I'm a huge advocate of like the apprenticeship model where you find a master and you just like work under the tutelage of a master. And I think using that resource is crafty, right? The resource is there. It's available if you're just willing to work hard and put the effort in. Find someone that kind of gets you unstuck so you're not spinning your wheels when you get to one of those places where it's just like nothing's making sense and you've tried, you think, everything under the sun. then you can be super successful. It is done. It is doable. So we got a couple questions. So why don't we jump in and start answering them? And then as we answer the questions, feel free to keep plugging them in the comments, and we'll take our best guesses. So here's one. What is the best portfolio projects? You want to tackle this one first, or you want me to give my 2 cents? I think you know my 2 cents, but
it might be, this will be interesting because I feel like our answers are probably the same because we tried 101 different things in a previous life in helping junior engineers. So I guess I'll go first. And best portfolio project, in my opinion, is, I'm assuming if you have a portfolio project or you have the need to make one, that you currently are looking for a job. And so I'm going to answer that under that current assumption. And so if you, it's the hardest thing to come up with like a made up portfolio project that you think is going to impress an employer. So what I always tell people to do is, as you're applying to jobs, let's say in a week you apply to 5 employers, take the employer you want to work at the most of those 5 employers and try to make a project that would kind of fit in with what it is that they're currently working on. So for instance, there was a digital marketing agency that a particular person wanted to apply to. And so I said, let's go into their case studies on their website, because pretty much every digital marketing agency has a case study, if not like a dozen on their site. And let's try and recreate one of the websites that they showed and were showcasing as like work that they had done for a client that they were super proud of. And so now when you finish that portfolio project, you're reaching back out. And so I know for sure this is something Michael says, and I'm going to steal it. If it's going to take you more than 3 to 5 days to build something, go ahead and scrap it and try to work on something else. So for instance, I did this when I applied to a marketing agency back in the day. I've actually done this exact technique. And so rather than build the entire site and make every single button work, I think I got 3 buttons to work and the form to work. And then that took me about 3 days, and then I was done. And so the rest of the site was not functional, but they could see that over the course of 3 days, rather than build everything in a template on design, I built everything in raw CSS. And they were just like, oh man, you're crazy. Like, why did you even attempt this? Right. And so, but now they know that I care and that I really want to work there. So for portfolio projects, I would try to spend no more than a week on a portfolio project and make it something that aligns with the people you are applying to the jobs for. So when you send it, I guarantee nobody else that you're applying against is going to be doing the same thing, right? So that's what I always advocate. Then you don't have to make something up, and they can see that you can do the work that they're going to be paying you to do, rather than have to guess. And you can actually sidestep a lot of coding questions in the interview if you just show up with this project in the first interview. So
bonus points. See that pro tip you drop right there. Not only do you have the guidance of like what to work on, but 100% agree. If you come to an interview and I'm interviewing you as a more like technical hiring manager, I just want to nerd out with you. I just want to like, let's get into the code and let's see like, why did you build it this way? And we'll sit there and we'll just like hash it out. And I'm far less likely to be asking you questions and trying to ask like the gotcha that you might think like, why is he asking like, how does a semaphore work? Right. And instead it's like, oh, that's cool. Like, why did you choose Vue? Right. And then you get to talk about how you love Vue or you love React or whatever it is. So bonus points there for that extra tip, man. I like that.
If you're trying to figure out how to configure a database for a project, you're going too deep into the project. It's going to take you too long to like do those. Just do something super basic. I think for every project I used an Excel spreadsheet as my quote unquote database. So I could kind of skip that step. You could use Firebase, I guess, if you're a little more sophisticated. But yeah, you just want to go in there with something you can show them that's cool. And I guarantee you're not going to have to answer as many coding questions as you otherwise would have.
And as a follow-on to this, I think it says for front-end web dev with HTML, JavaScript, React experience. Yeah, I think that fits. And I think the more you can not cut corners, but the more you can work like a real engineer would, right? They're going to usually use like a fixture or use some mock data initially. So put your mock data in, if you're a React, then maybe you like Express. So just put your data in Express and hit an endpoint and get you back some JSON, and then to make everything look nice and performant and look all fancy on the front end. And then you'll be good, right? You can apply for that entry-level role, and I think you'll be in good shape. You'll have something you can actually talk through. So, all right. Laurel says, cool resource. I agree. App Academy, the free stuff there, definitely way to go. And either we don't want to encourage people to, to jump in and pay for the App Academy full, because that's when they got a business, right? They got a business to run. But I feel like plenty of people, it's not going to be a great fit for them right now to go to a coding boot camp. And so if that's where you're at, where you're just like, now's not the right time, there are going to be a ton of resources that you can do beyond going to the immersive coding boot camp to get that experience, right? There's a ton of different ways. And both of us have seen lots and lots of people be successful without going down that path of like paying to go to a boot camp. It's not that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like not everybody can do it. So
can I jump in real quick to echo that?
Yeah, sure.
So
Sure.
App Academy Open is, again, the best resource that I've ever seen that's free. I know Free Code Camp is a great resource as well. But the thing App Academy does pretty well is it goes into some of the computer science stuff that they may or may not ask you in the interview process. And really, more than the resource, almost any resource would work if you could have 5 or 6 other people kind of going through it with you to help you problem solve, specifically a senior engineer. That's just the one that I found that's free because everybody asks me for free resources. So you're going to learn Ruby and React. And so don't get over stressed out about the fact that, you're learning. React is really the best skill. Michael probably agrees because he's told me this for like as long as React's been out, basically. But React feels like the best skill that you could possibly learn, and focusing on JavaScript and React especially. And don't get too hung up on the fact that there's may or may not be a lot of Ruby jobs in your area, because it's more about the principles of what you're doing. And so to kind of help you get mentally unstuck, just to give you an idea, I learned React and Ruby, and then my first job was in Angular 1 and Java. And so I got hired for languages that I'd never used. So just don't get hung up on the language itself.
Yeah, it's great advice. I think once you learn your first language, learning another one, you've got plenty of transferable skills, and it makes it really easy to just be like, oh, that's right, I've done it this way. It's a little different syntax, or feels a little bit different, but it's the same thing. So
definitely.
All right. So Aaron says, I just graduated from a web dev bootcamp. Should I be looking for entry-level, contractor, or an internship? Finding that first job seems to be the most difficult part. So I'll take a stab at one part of this that I'm going to hate on, which is do not take that internship unless it's a paid opportunity, and at the end of the internship, they've already indicated they are ready to hire, that this is not like they're thinking about maybe in the future they're going to hire someone. And here's my take on that. And then I'll let Jeff share his, because it might be slightly different. But I tend to have seen lots and lots of people that, number one, go into an internship feeling like they're not as valuable in the ecosystem, so they have to accept work and not get paid for it. And my point to that is, like, if you're not going to get paid for it, you might as well work on passion projects and things that you actually enjoy and can demonstrate like you liked and is relevant to the business you're trying to get a job at. The internship, like a letter from them or them saying, hey, they did a great job, not super valuable. It's just as valuable, in my opinion, to just have a bunch of passion projects that you worked on. The second piece that I've seen just a lot of is that when people get an internship, no matter how much they say, I know they said they're not sure if they're going to hire me or not, I know I might have to look for a job afterwards, people take their foot off the gas and they do not treat that 3 months like, I'm going to aggressively keep searching for a job. And so many of them don't. So the statistics are going to bear out that 2/3 of people that start an internship do not convert. So 2/3 of them are going to have to go back out into the job market and warm up and get started on the job search process. And that can be brutal and devastating. So I just say the odds are against you, whether it's paid or unpaid internship, if you don't ask those extra questions and you don't check all those extra boxes in terms of if that opportunity is really the best for you. In terms of like contract or whatnot, I think that to me is like comes down to the offer. If you need the benefits, then it might make more sense for you to try and get like a job where you're contract to hire, or you're somehow getting those benefits that you need. And then from the entry level, my guess is if you just graduate from a boot camp, that you are an entry level, and so you should not be looking for positions that are looking for mid to senior, because it's just gonna be discouraging. They're not gonna hire you. So you might as well just like focus on entry level. Potentially you could look at like QA or other roles that will get a foot in the door in an organization, versus trying to shoot for something where they're like, they say they're looking for 2 years of experience. It's gonna be really hard for you to like get across that threshold. So what do you think, Jeff?
I disagree. I've always disagreed slightly, not entirely.
I know.
So in terms of again, what I would be looking for. So I kind of have a caveat. I'm going to say blanket statement in general. If you're currently not working, then I would say accepting an internship for free is okay. And I have a caveat. So the only thing that you should be looking for in your first opportunity, I used to always say I don't really care about salary as much. Your first role, you just need a senior engineer that you know will be there to be a resource to be able to teach you. Because if you have a great mentor or a great boss, you're going to be learning so fast that like money will take care of itself over the course of time, much more than if you worry about salary in your first role. And so I would always look for, no matter which one of those scenarios it is, it feels like in contract, is the least likely to have a good mentor, just categorically. But that doesn't mean don't accept it. I would ask the question, am I going to have somebody that I'm going to have access to help? So with the internship, if you have a senior engineer that is willing to help you, and you are somebody who is having a hard time finding a side project or a passion project or a portfolio project, and you're kind of like paralysis by analysis scenario. And so if you're going to spend the next week not doing any coding whatsoever, then you might as well take the internship where at least you have somebody holding you accountable to be coding every day, essentially. So that's kind of my caveat. If you're already working on your own passion project or portfolio project and you're actively looking for jobs and somebody offers you a free internship, then you shouldn't take it because you're already being super productive and you're coding every day. So like the thing you should be focused on is coding every day. And if you need to use an internship for free as an accountability factor, then it's worth it. And that said, anytime that internship then gets in the way of you applying every day to other jobs is when you should consider not taking it or not doing it anymore, because you don't owe those people anything. They're not paying you. And so you should be focused on, producing income. So I would only use internships that are free as like I haven't coded in 2 weeks, and I guess this is a way to have somebody hold me accountable that's smarter than me and help me learn how to code. But you should not be looking at it as I should be working for the next 90 days for free, and then maybe hopefully they'll give me a job, because you could have probably gotten a job on your own at that point if you had been diligent in coding on your own and applying to jobs on your own each day. So
this is why Jeff and I agree, but also slightly disagree, because I look at it as like, it's kind of a crutch, right? Like you want to be accountable. And I know our audience, like the folks that listen to this, they want to be successful. And so if you want to be successful, you'll set goals, you'll create an accountability partner. You can do all those things and still stay with your foot on the gas on that job search. It's just really hard to kind of meander your way to a really good first opportunity. And so what I encourage people is like, if you want something, like go after it, because there's so many opportunities, and a lot of it just comes down to like the grit and the determination. And if you're kind of, in my opinion, selling yourself short by like taking on an opportunity, even if it's it's a way to keep you accountable, like figure that out, fix that part, because if you can fix that part, you're gonna have an amazing career in software engineering. But if you don't fix that part, it's also going to be really tough, right? If you need to have someone sort of hand holding you through the process, you're going to probably get, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jeff, but in my experience, the folks that are just checking the box and doing the bare minimum to like be successful in software engineering roles, they tend to get on the job and they tend to not really accelerate, and like their careers tend to stagnate pretty quickly. And they're the ones where companies come back and they're like, yeah, man, this person hasn't really seemed to develop. And it's like, well, first of all, you're the employer. You got to help them develop. That's part of your responsibility. But in order to be successful in software engineering, you really have to have a mentality where it's a lifelong learning. You're constantly going to be advancing yourself by like investing in the time it takes on the weekends and in the evenings to just get better and like practice your craft. And the more reps you get, the more time you put on the keyboard, the better you're going to get, the better offers you're going to get. The whole thing kind of is like a flywheel effect, right? So 100%, I think, agree with the spirit of what Jeff is saying, which is do anything that you need to hold yourself accountable. But the faster you can do that and become diligent in this, the easier everything becomes. The job search becomes easier. The process to like convince people you have the skill becomes easier, because you're just doing all those things that we say until we're blue in the face. But when people actually execute on them, this process goes super fast, and it's like kind of enjoyable to see people, be successful. So,
yeah, and we agree, and I agree also with that from a high level. It was more because when people came to us previously in their job search, they had already been looking for like 90 days, and then they had reached out to us for help. And so pragmatically, I'd always be like, well, if you had an internship for the last 90 days, you could have at least been coding. Instead, they're going to look at your GitHub and you're going to have not been coding for basically the last 3 months. Like, what have you been working on? Kind of a deal is going to be the first thing that crosses their mind. So, so pragmatically, if you can just knock out like the applying, keep track, follow up, then we know within 6 to 8 weeks, like on average, you should be getting an offer.
That's the formula, folks. I don't think I need to do this anymore. I think we just we laid out the formula.
It's not complex. It's just a lot of work, you know.
It is. That's the thing. I think a lot of folks think because in their brain they might have prior experience and they've had other jobs before, and so every job they probably ever applied to before they apply, and then they get a call back, and then they go in and they get an interview, and at the end of the interview, they're like, "Hey, I love you. We'd like to have you start next week." And it does not work like that when you're interviewing for a software engineering job in the beginning. Later on, when you're better, then they might do that. They might invite you to hey, come fly a desk in our office and we'll take you to lunch and we'll see if you like this environment, and then woo you to come work at their organization. But not when you're a beginner. When you're a beginner, the process is just very different. But if you follow these tips, it's super doable, right? It's a certain amount of skill, but it's way more grit and ambition and following through. That's going to be required for you to be successful. So it's easy for someone like myself or Jeff to see people completely messing up and not following the process, and just know that, oh, this is going to be so painful. It's going to take this person so long because they've got to correct this. And then once they fix that, then they can do this, and then they'll be cool. And they're going to get a job, and they're going to be solid. But we see that. We see it's just painful. So I am going to give some shout outs to people because I see people making comments in here. Andy Hall, Workforce Partners, thanks for the support. Appreciate it. Love you sending folks here that we can help. Etienne, yeah, nice. Love your support, and we'll invite you next time. Anytime you want to come on, I do this every week, so hit me up, man. This isn't
Etienne goes on vacation every week and then wonders why he doesn't get the invite.
Yeah, it's all right, cool. I'm here. I've been doing this for I don't know, a year.
So, we want him to invite us on vacation. That's what we want.
So if you have questions, drop them in the comments, and we'll take a stab at answering them. Usually what happens is I start talking and then people are listening, so they're not typing, and I have to keep reminding folks, man, put a question in there, because we love being able to directly answer something that's relevant to you and get you unstuck. So that's the name of the game, getting you unstuck and moving forward.
Real quick, also, when it comes to applying to jobs, this is something that I went to a boot camp. I then started a boot camp. I then went and got a developer job on my own after that. So there's a lot of events that led to those three things happening in a row. But the most important thing for this particular format is I had to go through the interview process myself. And so the hardest part, I can tell you, is when you bomb an interview, which I did, and they asked me to draw a schema for Instagram on a whiteboard, essentially. And so I did not study databases, SQL databases, as well as I should have at that time. And so I just I feel like I just started having a conversation and tried to distract from the fact that they asked me to do that, because I just didn't know. So I asked a bunch of questions to delay it, and then couldn't figure it out. And so that was my first interview after applying for 2 jobs a day for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And so I had all my hopes and dreams set on, oh man, this is going to be an awesome company to go work for. And then I completely bombed it. And so the key is the next day, you just got to keep applying to jobs. And I wrote follow-up emails. I built them a special project. I did all the things. And to this day, they never followed up again, and I never heard from them. And so you can't be discouraged, because it really only takes one company to be able to say yes in that process. So when I say it's not a complex process, it's really not complex. It's only hard because there are going to be some bumps in the road along the way to go get that first job. Because once you getting your first job is seriously one of the hardest things I've ever done. It's on par with as hard as starting a company, in my opinion. And so, but once you get your first job, you can talk to, and I'll plug my podcast for a minute.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
But if you listen to, I have a podcast called Chasing Squirrels, where we interview CTOs and ask them about their hiring processes. And right now, the Proven Recruiting, who is a sponsor of the podcast, all the candidates they have 2, 3, 4 offers from companies in Southern California looking for them to come work for them. So, and Mike knows, I'm sure Mike gets hit up just as often, where he probably has a LinkedIn message every day from somebody wanting him to come work for him just because he has software engineering on his LinkedIn profile. So once you can get past the first job and really put in your first 12 to 24 months, you know, I don't want to guarantee anything, but basically, as long as technology is around, people are going to need your skill set, and you're not going to have to look for another job if you don't want to for the rest of your career. So just to throw that out there.
Yeah. I mean, I like to say, as long as you're not a terrible person, once you get that first job, as long as you're a decent employee, like you don't no call, no show, you don't drink on the job, you're pretty much going to be set for the rest of your career. And even maybe your kid can come in the generation right after you. These jobs aren't going away. They're really resilient, even in a bad economy. We've done really, really well in terms of the tech roles continuing to kind of grow and expand. Sure, there's some ebb and flow and some attrition, but they've done way better than just about any other industry sector. So I'm super bullish on the fact that once you learn this skill, this trade, you're going to be very employable. So it's well worth the pain that you have to go through to get that first job. After that, you get the dogs in the office and the catered breakfast and lunch, the unlimited PTO and the limitless LaCroix in the refrigerator, snack walls, all that good stuff. So it's a lot of work. It's a grind, but it's super doable, right? It's not complex. It's just hard, right? It is simple.
That is correct.
It just takes a lot of work. So, all right. So Etienne asked a question. He asked, what do modern apprenticeships look like? Ooh, that's a good question. I happen to have one. So I have my day job is I have a nonprofit. The nonprofit runs the Department of Labor Registered Apprenticeship Program. And what that means is I have the privilege of paying people to learn how to code. And so from my perspective, it means people can come in and from day one, they can earn a living wage and get to work on real world projects for big companies. So our biggest client is Becton Dickinson. So you know they're big when they got a 2-letter domain. So their domain is bd.com. So we have some projects for them and a bunch for their clients, big clients, small clients. But they specifically reach out to us because they know that because we're not having a barrier of how much do you have to pay for the program or how much do you need to learn before you get into the program, that it's more accessible to folks. And so from my perspective, an apprenticeship program looks inclusive, right? It's got lots of people from a variety of backgrounds, and it's a pathway where people are learning relevant skills that they can apply, you know, on day one on the job, right? And it's just like Jeff and I talked about at the very beginning of the conversation. It's a master in a trade that's working alongside of someone that needs just an extra amount of guidance, but really needs that hands-on experience. So from a customer's perspective, as a business owner, I love being able to solve the biggest challenge that a lot of folks have, which is retention, right? Even if they do a good job hiring folks, they're not often able to retain as many of the people that they hire because the folks jump around a lot and they're not necessarily as loyal as they might be if a company invests in their training. So that's a good question. Hopefully I gave you a sufficient answer on apprenticeships. It is kind of my jam, right? I think folks know that at this point. Etienne also says, from a CTO's point of view, how do I best prepare for an apprenticeship program? Top 3 things I need to prepare C-suite and members, my projects before starting an apprenticeship. Good question. That's a deep one. That's like, this is going to require some thought here for a second. What we do that's different than many other apprenticeship programs is we actually do a turnkey. So we actually eliminate a lot of these things that are necessary from the side of a company. So it's hard for me to like detach it from what we do. We do a really good job of like supervising the apprentices to make sure that they're being productive and that when they have questions, they come to my team first before they go to internal resources inside of the company. But that's what you need to be prepared for if you wanted to roll out your own apprenticeship program. You need to be prepared to answer like questions that might seem super basic and you're going to wonder like, why is there this gap of knowledge from the participants? It's because they're new, right? So I'd say to best prepare, make sure you've got the resources available to have the patience and time to answer questions that are going to seem super trivial and super junior, but there's going to be holes that folks will have in the early part of their career. If you think back as to how you were as a CTO when you're early on in your career, you're going to have these weird knowledge gaps that you've got to be willing to kind of like, you know, fill. I think it's also important that folks have the right, what does success look like mentality. So Does the addition of these apprentices make your team overall better? Does it help your senior engineers lift themselves up and become more culturally competent, become more proficient in being able to explain how things work? Does it make the rest of your team more productive? It should be an additive thing, and it shouldn't be like a drain on resources. It actually should make your team better. But I think everybody has to have the right mentality and be open to that kind of change. So I'll start there. I don't know about, I don't know, I'm not good with three, like whatever the third thing is. I think from my perspective, that it just has to culturally align with where the organization is. They have to want to do it. The C-level suite has to want to ultimately check some of the boxes that apprenticeship does, which is it helps you really strengthen your commitment to investing in other people, whether it's your existing staff or the new people you're bringing onto your team. If they're not invested in it, if they're doing it as like a dog and pony, like we're trying to get our diversity numbers up, it ain't going to work, right? If you're selecting candidates that already went through a boot camp and all of your apprentices are just being hired through that mechanism to like reduce the risk in hiring and to de-risk people you should already just be hiring, don't do apprenticeships, just hire people, right? If they have the background, they have the skill set, just hire them. So
what are some of the projects that are there specific things that you see companies to take off the end of this question, like projects in particular that companies are like, oh, hey, it's kind of a waste, like resources wise, that our senior engineers be doing X, Y, Z. Maybe this would be a good project to send to Michael and his apprentices.
There's a lot of inefficiencies in the system for sure. And so I think for a lot of shops, because they don't have the capacity to develop folks, they kind of have to have like their senior engineers doing work that they otherwise should be able to have a tier of folks that can like work on and just crush and knock out, right? If you think about it as like the bricklaying, right? If you're building a house, you need people that are at a high level of skill, but then you also need people that are just going to come in and they're just going to lay bricks most of the day. And they're just going to build the foundation and like get things in place and do some of the finish work, things like that. So I think that's perfect. Things in the middle of the backlog that aren't getting prioritized, but are going to make people super happy. Like I know you got some experience with adding icons, the buttons and arrows and colors on the buttons, like things like that just make people like super happy. But yet it's a little trivial for a senior engineer to like plod through some of those issues. So if you can carve out sections of the backlog, it makes it much easier for you to have meaningful work that adds value for an external or internal customer. But it's one of those where it's also not going to like be in the critical path of getting something shipped and deployed, right? So the middle of the backlog tends to be the sweet spot.
How long does it take to ramp them up if they're worried about having them take a couple months for ramp up, or can they get ramped up on some of the projects you were working on fairly quickly?
Depends. Like we try and really make sure we're in specialized niches. So a lot of the work that my apprentices work on is in either C#, ServiceNow, Microsoft ecosystem, so Azure and related Microsoft stuff, because they gave us a bunch of money. So got to plug Microsoft. But we feel like that's a good ecosystem for our folks. That it's very relevant in many of our clients are either mid-market or larger enterprise organizations. And so they're in the Microsoft ecosystem or they're using ServiceNow. If you're a smaller business, you're not using ServiceNow. It's not a like new startup technology, right? And this is for organizations that are large and have 10,000 computers they have to keep track of, right? So we feel like it's pretty fast to bring them in, because they already have the core competency in that ecosystem. And so they can add value pretty quickly, right? They just need to kind of get familiar with what is the business angle, like what do you actually need done? And then they're usually off to the races. So 1 or 2 sprints and they're in there, they're pulling tickets, adding value. So
like it.
All right, Brandon, I feel like I'm just prattling on about my programs now. So Brandon asked a question. This is a big one. So this is long. This is like a little story. It's like covering up my face. So this question is targeted towards people who want to remain in San Diego. Would you recommend bootcamp grads or comp science students look and land entry-level jobs wishing to stay and be part of the tech ecosystem to avoid long-term out-of-state remote contract positions? And then he kind of, okay, so it sounds like what you're saying is there a risk to taking out-of-state remote work? Sure, but sometimes beggars can't be choosers. I mean, I would say at this point, take the work, right? Regardless of where the work is, take the work. And then you can always, once you have experience, move into wherever you want to be, whatever market, whatever space, and live wherever you want to live. So I saw you shake your head no. You disagree?
There's no risk to applying to an out-of-state job, in my opinion. In the sense that I've spoken at San Diego JavaScript meetups while being in North Carolina, and primarily every single hiring manager, CTO I interview is also in San Diego, and I am still in North Carolina. So especially during this time, you can be involved in the community right now, kind of from wherever. And for bootcamp grads and computer science grads, again, there are a few exceptions, but you really, again, just want to be looking for somebody who's going to be an awesome mentor that's going to be able to spend like 5 to 10 hours a week helping you become a better engineer if it's your first role. And then if you're still physically in San Diego, once everything opens back up, you could still go to all the meetups and just tell everybody what you're working on and like still be super connected. You don't necessarily have to work in San Diego for a company that is in San Diego to be super connected in San Diego.
And the one thing I'll add to that is this is an area where it's kind of gray now. There's kind of a gray area about what the future is going to look like, because we're in a state where we had to all work remote. We had no choice, right? And so the question is, how many of these jobs are going to remain remote, and how many teams are going to remain distributed, and how many are going to come back to more like regional and like centered inside of offices or around specific time zones, et cetera. So some of this is going to remain to be seen, like how the industry shakes up over the next, let's say, 12 to 24 months. But then I think long term, people will have a chance to really evaluate on its own whether or not it makes sense to have a distributed team, or makes sense to have teams in offices and things like that. We really didn't have a choice, and it was really bad for a lot of teams. So I think the backlash for some is just going to be like, let's get everybody back in here as fast as we can. It'll take a little while, I think, for us to get to an equilibrium and to see what this is going to look like, because it's been unique this last year. I don't know about you, but it's been super different with the number of companies that are now like much more open to remote, much more open to like trusting employees and knowing that they're going to be productive and having grace and all those kinds of things. But as a junior engineer, get that job, man. Get the paid experience. Get it under your belt. So I get it. So Jeff, when do I get interviewed? First of all, you're asking the wrong person. I'm the host, so you gotta ask me. host. Jeff's just a guest. You're asking the guest how to become a guest on my podcast. Love it. Let's talk at the end. We should definitely chat. Cool. Any other questions? I know there's folks out there that have questions. We're getting so much good comments and feedback today. This is amazing. But what else could we provide that would be helpful for folks? So shoot a question. If you're just joining, I do this every Tuesday. We have a special guest today, Jeff. Hopefully Jeff will join us again in the future. It sounds like Etienne wants to join us again in the future. So you know how to get a hold of me.
So I'll just real quick again say that Michael and I have stayed in pretty close touch since working together at the Code School, and he's currently helping people with the work portion in this every week. And then my podcast is not live, but it's with a CTO each week that's currently hiring. And so I kind of ask them what their interview process looks like, what technologies they're hiring for, and what it is they're working on. So if you're kind of in the process of looking for your next potential role, even if you're a junior engineer, I think it's been about 25, 26 CTOs at this point. So you can kind of get a sample size of what it is that the decision makers are actually looking for when they're hiring engineers. So it's not as friendly as asking questions beforehand, but you can kind of get a good sample size as to what all the tech leaders in San Diego are looking for. And so that's kind of the format.
Yep. I couldn't underscore how important it is to just reach out, right? And don't be shy about like either connecting with myself or Jeff. My email is covered up right now, but my email is like right there. So hit me up and let me know if you're having a challenge, and there may be a way that we can route you to either this is how you fix the problem. And again, don't feel too dissuaded if my solution for you is come to this thing and ask questions, because my time is fairly limited. So I can only like dedicate an hour per week to just answering random strangers' questions. But if you hit me up via email and I need to, I can just do a one-off answer, or I'll just say, hey, let me save that and I'll cover it on the next Tuesday. And so we have a lot of those where people will just send me a question and I'll cover it really quickly. Hannah asks, do I know anything about Pathrise? Yes. Their reputation for helping people acquire jobs? No. I've been looking for 6 months and I've had one interview. Would like help from a company like Pathrise, or would it help to get it? So the short answer to that question is I don't know of any other shortcuts other than the ones that Jeff and I share, right? I wish it were as easy as saying, like, you can contact a recruiter and the recruiter is going to shop your resume around and you'll get leads, and it's just not the reality. The reality is it does really take the effort that we're talking about. And I'm just not aware of anybody that shortcuts that process for early career developers, because there's just a huge supply of early career developers, and there's not really an incentive on the company's behalf to target placing junior engineers. So it's hard for me to find, like, and Jeff and I, trust me, we've tried this for a really long time to figure out what is the model for placing junior engineers inside of companies and making money doing that. And Jeff and I have tried to figure it out for years.
Or even breaking money or breaking even.
Yeah, even breaking even. So anybody that says I can get junior engineers a job and there's very little effort involved from the junior engineer, I'm like, yeah, okay, show me, because it's a hard business proposition to put together. So I'm skeptical if anybody is, and I don't know if this is the case with Pathrise, because I've heard of them, but I don't know their percentages and what it takes to get a job through them. So I would just say there's no silver bullet, there's no magic pill, there's no easy way to do this. It really is just going to require work. And more than happy to chat with you, Hannah, about what are the specific things that you're doing. So if you have more questions, like what is the specific number of like reach outs that you're doing? We talk about that a lot. So if you're doing 10 really good reach outs every week, you're submitting 10 job applications that you've researched, that you've tried to connect with someone inside of the organization. And so you've got an internal champion that's kind of like pushing for you, then you'll get there. And it shouldn't take a long time. If it's taking a really long time, it might be because you're shortcutting some of the steps. And, you know, we can, if you ask the questions, we can try and point you in the right direction. Jeff, what do you think? Pathrise, thumbs up?
I don't know. I haven't heard of them. It looks like they take 9% of, they have like an income share agreement of 9% of your income once they get you a job. So
is there like a training?
Yeah, they kind of take you through like the job hunting process, it looks like. So if you know somebody that's gone through it and it's worked for them, maybe, I don't know. I've never used them, so I don't know. It really comes down to those 10 a week, and has kind of always been the number that we've been using, because that's what's tended to work. So with those two, you just reach out and write customized emails or LinkedIn messages to those people. And then you literally just follow up with them until you get a job, essentially, or until they tell you they've hired for that position. And if you do that over the course of 6 weeks, you'll start to get, usually by week 3 or 4, you'll get at least 1 or 2 phone interviews at that point. And then you just keep track of all of it in a spreadsheet, and you're kind of off to the races. And so the next follow-up question is always, I feel like I'm bothering people if I follow up with them every week until they respond. And so the reality is persistence is something they're actually going to hire you for, not something that works against you. Because any essential hiring manager is going to value persistence. And a lot of times hiring is something that kind of takes a back burner to things that are less important, but feel more important to the business owner in real time. And so sometimes just the fact that you're persistent and you're always at the first one in their inbox each week saying like, hey, I'm just curious, did you guys hire this past week, or is this position still open, will be the key to getting you the interview. And then you're going to show up with a project that's exactly what they're working on for their customers. And at that point, you're going to have a greater than 50% chance of being able to, you know, at least get an offer in that particular role. In my experience, I guess.
Question from Joshua. Are remote entry-level jobs harder to get? I would say this year, no, because they're just as hard as any other job, because they're the only jobs available. And it used to be that they were harder, but I don't think that's the case now. And well, I don't want to say they're harder. I would say there were more people competing for those roles because more people wanted the flexibility, right? It was a nicer thing to be able to say, hey, I can work from wherever, right? So you usually were competing with a larger pool of candidates. That's kind of the way you're competing now. So I would say it's kind of how everybody's working at the moment. So don't stress over it. Like, don't worry about your competition, because I can tell you right now, your competition does not believe in the donut rule. Right, Jeff? Donut rule.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about this guy.
Your competition doesn't believe in that. So I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. We've had students where they said, you know, one of the ways you can impress someone is after you meet with them or you want to get on their radar and get their attention, you send them a box of donuts, right? And so at the end of the day, as many times as I say that, CTOs are not going to start getting fat on donuts and everyone's going to start sending donuts. There's still only going to be like 1% of the people that hear that message will actually go out and buy the box of donuts and actually follow through. It's more about the following through than it is about the pastries, folks. So what I'm saying is, of all of the messages that we deliver that could add value for folks, only a small percentage of people are going to execute. And you could be in that percentage. You just have to execute. So don't worry about how your competition is doing things. Just focus on you and coding every day, working on projects, getting better, and then following the mechanics of what we know works from just like seeing it work a bunch of times in the past. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was an employer that came into the classroom and said, you guys could send donuts, and then he was the only one, and then he got the job. And so that applies across the board in the sense that there's never been a better time to be a developer in terms of the supply and demand looking for roles, right? And so it is something where if you tell 10 people that they just need to apply to 10 jobs a day and follow up with each internal recruiter or external recruiter for a position for 6 weeks, probably only 10% of people are going to be doing that. Those 10% are the only people that are your competition, if you want to look at it that way. And there's enough of those people that all of those people will get jobs, essentially. So it doesn't really matter if it's remote or if it's in person, because for me personally, it's easier to get it in person because I can connect easier in person. But I kind of think everybody kind of feels that way to some degree, that, you know, it's remote. So you're kind of in the same boat as everybody else. If you're doing a project and you're sharing your screen and you're walking through why you built what you built, as soon as you meet those people in that interview, you're going to be just as far ahead as if you were doing that in person. And so I kind of, especially for the remote jobs, just I would ask the question how they handle pair programming or working with junior engineers remotely, because that is super important in terms of your growth. And I keep mentioning it because of how important it really is, especially in your first role. So again, just make sure that you'll have a resource that you can help get you unstuck for your first year and your first job. And then it wouldn't really matter if it was remote or in person. Again, if it was me and the office was open and you're in a state or a place where that's okay, and you can take whatever precautions you need to abide by the rules, then I would still prefer to go in person if it was my first job and I knew my senior engineer resource was going to be sitting next to me. Just because you can level up so much faster, your learning cycles can go so much faster. But then once you kind of get into the zone, it doesn't really matter either way.
Yeah. So a big difference between like what the experience in searching for the job and what the experience is going to feel like on the job. And I would 100% agree. I would not go for a remote job in any way, shape, or form if you could avoid it as your first job. I think it would be way more to your advantage to actually be in person and have a more easy time for folks to visually see when you're stuck. Because sometimes you get in rabbit hole and you get stuck and like you can't even like pull yourself out. It's almost like you've been hypnotized by the problem that you're working on. But other people visually around you can see that, and they can see you're kind of like you're not being productive, and just hard to do that on your own. It's hard to be self-aware enough to pull yourself out and like move on and get help when you need help. It's way easier for people to just like check in on you and be like, yo, you've been sitting at your desk for the last 5 hours. Would you get up and go get lunch? Right? Like doing that on your own, it's hard. You get into your own little world. So, all right. This is a fairly deep and philosophical question, somewhat. What are the greatest challenges facing inner city kids from becoming software engineers? There are a lot of STEM programs, so I agree with that, and they drop off. Part of it, I think, is systemic. So I've noticed that a lot of the STEM programs and a lot of folks are interested in teaching folks earlier on. And my personal opinion is that folks are interested in teaching people earlier on because they have the perception that they cannot change something that's more now and more immediate, and so they tend to want to defer it and say, well, let's go up and let's figure out what the source of the problem is and fix it down there, because it's too hard to hold ourselves accountable for making change right now. What can we do today to help someone that could be a good fit somewhere actually get in? That's a hard thing. It's much easier to be like, I'm teaching kids after school, right? And put together an after school program. And you're not going to hold yourself accountable to results at that point. You can just say, like, we deliver training to X number of people. So that's part of my belief as to why folks feel more comfortable taking on the challenge of teaching people earlier on, because they feel like, they're going to get way more people in the system, and at some point the problem is just going to fix itself on the other end. I tend to be more pessimistic and think the problem is not going to change until hiring managers and decision makers fundamentally are willing to take risks and fix broken problems. They can't expect the under-resourced inner city folks to be able to solve the problem by just giving them additional training, etc. So I think there's a gap between the early folks that are interested in investing earlier on and the delivery on the other end, which is like, folks need jobs. And so folks begin to feel like they're not seeing people represented in those roles. They also tend to feel like they're not being given opportunities to get to that role, like if it requires a college degree or other barriers that are in the way. And so they're just kind of discouraged. And from my experience, I know a lot of women that enter programs at the CS level, and they begin and they declare their majors as CS majors, and then they don't graduate with CS degrees. And that's a reflection, I think, of a toxic environment that are created by the male engineers, right? So we have to take ownership of that. If we're not seeing as many of our folks get through college, we have to ask, well, what's happening between junior and senior year, and women are deciding that they don't want to graduate with that major, right? What's happening with the selection process when people are getting into jobs? There's big systemic issues. I don't think there's one single thing that's causing this problem. I think there's a lot, right? And so folks have to just be willing to ask what success should look like and then work towards it. So, Jeff, what are your thoughts on diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Well, kind of to go off some of your comments, one of the things that you and I have been trying to solve this problem for seems like 20 years, but it's probably only been like 6 or 7. So one of the biggest discouragements that I know we've shared since we started working on this problem from a high level was a lot of resources, whether private or public resources, tend to go to things that look like they're helpful, but they're not. And so one of the key focuses is getting that job, right? So there's like a lot of city governments and state governments, and I'm not saying any one particular city or state, just categorically, those funds will be set aside to learn tech skills, right? And so if you dive in deep, those tech skills are like Microsoft Office, that the resources are being spent to like teach people Microsoft Office. And so then they go and put that on their resume, and then they don't get hired because that's not like a common tech skill that people are primarily hiring for. It's kind of like a supplementary skill. And so if I feel like part of the problem is that the people that are in control of the large portions of resources are throwing money at it, but not systematically thinking about like, okay, again, everything revolves around putting people to work, right? And getting them a skill set that ensures that they can have a higher standard of living. And so that means getting people jobs and working with employers to see what employers can kind of help fix that issue. And so it's so super discouraging once you start to notice a lot of the resources go to teach people things that don't close the gap in terms of like getting them into the workforce. So that's kind of what I feel like we've kind of collectively noticed is learn how to code programs, whether they're online or some various program. They don't end in a job. It's just like, here's a certificate. And it's like, well, I can't pay my bills with a certificate, like I want to need to learn something that I can actually go like learn to fish with, kind of a deal.
And the key with the job is it's a little bit bigger than, it's like when you buy a suit that you don't quite fit in yet, but you're going to grow into it. The job buys you that runway that you can like grow into the suit. And now you're actually pretty good, but you need that. You need reps. You need the ability to get paid for reps, which is why I love
100%,
it, right? You
100%.
need to get paid reps. So we can get more people.
if those programs went to in apprenticeships, it would be everything would change. I mean, all those resources that are going to teach people Microsoft Office, they went to apprenticeships and got them more reps. Like it would be game changing for a particular city or a state, in my opinion.
I love it. Working on it right now.
It's more of a people issue than anything else. So
yeah,
it's not going to happen tomorrow.
All right, we're running. We're going to rip through a few of these really quickly because I want to make sure we get as many of these we can in the next 120 seconds. So, when reaching out, is it better to go for another software engineer or someone who does the hiring in a target company? My vote is 1,000% software engineer. What about you, Jeff?
Ooh, I say hiring manager.
Ooh, okay. So, okay, here's my reason. I'll give you my short reason as to why I think that is. Because I think it's easier for you to create a direct relationship with someone there inside the company that can then be an internal advocate for you, like an internal champion. And so it's just usually easier to have a developer to developer conversation and build sort of like a little relationship than it is to establish relationship with the person that does the hiring. Because I'm assuming, let me just assume that the person that does the hiring, you mean HR, right? If you mean like the VP of engineering, sure, you can talk to the VP of engineering, but they're usually like first person you talk to is going to be from HR. So
I go straight to the decision maker. And so just to clarify, if you're getting a hold of an engineer or a hiring manager at a company, you're already in that top 10% of people that's going to get a job within the next few weeks. So,
right.
But typically the only thing I ask a software engineer or coach people to do is to ask for the email of the hiring manager. If I can't find the hiring manager themselves, because I'd like to write as few emails as possible. But if I can't find the hiring manager within an organization, I'll do a software engineer, but I like to go straight to the decision maker.
Yeah,
possible.
I think we're kind of saying the same thing. I think what I would suggest is just avoid HR. Don't talk to HR. Talk to the hiring manager on the tech team, right? You want to talk to the VP of engineering or the lead, whoever.
All right, I can get on board with that.
All right, Joe Mama, there's your shout out. Is it advisable to lie on the resume and then learn the thing you lied about to get the job? No, Joe Mama, it's not a good idea. I think Jeff would concur. Brandon asks, do either of you have a concern over SaaS apps like Honeycode? Never heard of it. Making it tough for prospective junior devs due to companies opting to go with no. Low-code solutions are not going to take over. There's not going to be a machine that's going to get super smart and build software for you. That's not going to happen. Not in my lifetime. Not in Jeff's lifetime. We're just on the forefront of quantum computing, and we need like the next breakthrough after that before we'll have like the what is it called in Terminator, where it becomes like sentient and it takes over and it kills all humans. Yeah, Skynet's not coming in our lifetime. We're going to be good. We're going to get Martians before we get Skynet. Joe Mama, is it advisable to do 2 internships at once? No, it's kind of unethical, and I think mostly a waste of your time. But that's my take.
I don't think I'm taking the person's question seriously, so we can go to the next one.
I think that was the last one. I think that's all we had for today.
To go back to the low code thing, I think the low code situation is actually super good and valuable for people in marketing and sales that want to not bother the dev team for complex solutions, but maybe like use a Zapier type integration where it just goes from like Salesforce to Twilio, and you can get your sales leads texted to you. And so I think from a business owner perspective, if you're a business owner, a salesperson, or a marketing person, it's super valuable to learn no code. But the reality is that for custom solutions, at least for the next, foreseeable future, they're going to need somebody to go in and create those from scratch or use existing code bases. So
it's also a balance between getting stuff done. And I'll tell you, the smartest senior engineers are the ones that are just like me. I got like the $300 a month Zapier subscription, right? I don't have the little $20 little trial banger account. I got a $300 Zapier bill every month because it takes a little while to roll APIs. And sure, I could roll an API and I could host it on Lambda, and it would cost me next to nothing. But time is money. And if you just need to really quickly integrate 2 things, use the tool that's going to get you that buy versus build decision is a real decision that you should be making, and you shouldn't just poo-poo, low code, no code solutions because you feel like it doesn't allow you to hit your mechanical keyboard and like bang out some code, right? So I don't for that reason, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think there's a good number of real software engineers like myself that use low code and no code solutions to solve business problems for companies that need an economical solution and don't need customizations. They just need something that's like, I just need to be able to get my leads to go to this spreadsheet and then send off an email. I'm not going to write you some custom code for that. That is nonsense. I'm gonna hook you up on Zapier and then you can get it into your CRM and be done with it. So if we need something more custom, that's where you have the ability to go in and add value for that customer and do something. But you're not adding value by charging them like, $500 to put it on AWS Lambda. Like, they're not going to spend $500 in the first year on Zapier. Like, why would you do that to that customer?
It's just going to be there's going to be more and more low code solutions, and so it'll just knock out a bunch of stuff that you would have had to manually code before. But this is a rough analogy for various reasons, but it's kind of like when WordPress, like, oh, everybody's just going to do a WordPress site. Like, it's not the case, because your customers are going to have customized needs, and then you're going to write your own customized themes, and it's just down the rabbit hole you go.
Yeah, don't stress over it. I think there's going to be plenty of good custom work for folks to have to hire software engineers for. So those jobs are not going to get automated away. So they're going to need us to fight Skynet. So we can't all be gone, right? We're going to need a few of us.
Well, I always have this theory. They're going to come out with like frameworks for AI, frameworks for machine learning. Then all the software engineers are going to move there, and then they're going to need somebody to maintain the website. And so it's not a zero-sum game. They're just going to constantly need more and more people and try to automate as much of it as they can so that they can go find more people.
While you're marinating all those things, I'm just going to be banging out WordPress websites. So that's the reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate having you on, Jeff, and we should do this again. So I kind of like this format because it went by super fast. And now it's my favorite time of the day, lunchtime. So
yeah.
If anybody out there, we didn't get a chance to answer your question, feel free to shoot me an email. It's mike@cccareers.org. You can hit up Jeff, check out his both his podcast and his website is a pretty nice take on the job search. So Golden Squirrel IO is right there. Yeah. Any other parting words, Jeff, other than this is a fantabulous thing and you're going to want to do it on every Tuesday at 12 o'clock?
Pretty much. I got a few messages, so I'll shoot out Zoom links for going through the exact process Mike and I talked about tonight at 5:30, 2:30 Pacific time, and
nice.
Good to go.
Did you throw it in the comments? Throw it in the comments so people can the little link to your meetup.
I should do that.
I should have put it in a little scrolling banner thing, but
All right, put it in the comments.
First time. It's dry run, right?
Yeah,
all right.
No worries.
Thanks, everybody. Later.